The diplomatic summit had descended into chaos in less than 3 minutes. Kaelin stood perfectly still in the center of the ornate chamber, her hands raised at shoulder height, palms open. Around her, 23 Veskari cubs sat in a loose circle, their luminescent fur rippling with anxious colors that shifted from pale blue to worried amber. Each cub was no larger than a human child, but their fanged mouths and retractable claws marked them as predators. Young predators, but predators nonetheless. Surrounding them all were 47 Galactic Coalition soldiers, weapons drawn and aimed inward. The barrels of plasma rifles glowed with ready charges. Targeting lasers painted red dots across the polished floor. Step away from the human, cubs. Commander Thexral barked through his translator, his forearms gesturing sharply. She has taken you hostage. We will extract you safely. The largest cub, Vash, pressed closer to Kaelin's leg. His ears flattened against his skull, but he made no move toward the soldiers. None of the cubs did. Nobody's been taken hostage, Kaelin said quietly, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Please lower your weapons. You're scaring them. Scaring them. Ambassador Krelvox stepped forward, his scales rattling with indignation. Human, those are Vaskari younglings. They are apex predators from birth. They fear nothing. Kaelin glanced down at Vash, who trembled against her ankle. His small claws gripped the fabric of her pants, and his eyes, large and golden, were wide with fear. The other cubs huddled together, their bioluminescent fur now pulsing with distress signals that painted the walls in waves of crimson and violet. With respect, Ambassador, Kaelin said carefully, they're children, and right now, they're terrified. The crisis had begun during what should have been a routine cultural exchange. The Vaskari delegation had brought their cubs to demonstrate their species' early development capabilities, a point of pride in a galaxy where most sentient species were helpless for years after birth. The cubs could walk within hours of hatching, hunt within days, and speak simple phrases within weeks. Kaelin had been assigned as the human cultural liaison, a role she'd accepted reluctantly. Humanity was still new to the Galactic Coalition, still proving itself worthy of membership. Every interaction was scrutinized, every human representative a potential disaster waiting to happen. She'd been showing the cubs a simple human toy, a wooden puzzle box her nephew had made. When the alarm sounded, the adult Vaskari had been called away to an emergency in another section of the station. A technical malfunction, they'd said. They would return shortly. The cubs should remain in the cultural exchange chamber, supervised by the coalition guards stationed outside. But something had gone wrong. The guards had burst in with weapons drawn, shouting about a security breach. They'd seen the cubs, unsupervised, clustered around a human, and jumped to the worst conclusion. Hostage situation. Human aggression. Potential interspecies incident. Now here they stood, locked in a standoff that made no sense to anyone except the terrified cubs who'd chosen to trust a human over armed soldiers of their own coalition. This is your final warning, Commander Thexral announced. Cubs, move away from the human, or we will be forced to intervene for your safety. Vash growled, a sound that started deep in his small chest. It wasn't a threatening growl. Kaelin had heard those during the documentary footage she'd studied. This was different. Higher-pitched, desperate. The other cubs joined in, creating a chorus of frightened sounds that echoed off the chamber's high ceiling. Stop, Kaelin said louder now. Everyone just stop for 1 second and think. She slowly lowered herself to her knees, moving with deliberate care. The soldiers tensed, weapons tracking her movement. Vash immediately pressed against her side, and 2 other cubs crawled into her lap. Look at them, Kaelin said, her voice carrying across the chamber. Really look. They're not aggressive. They're not threatening anyone. They're scared children who don't understand why armed adults are shouting at them. They are Vaskari, Ambassador Krelvox repeated, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. They do not experience fear like other species. They're experiencing it right now, Kaelin countered. She gently stroked Vash's head, the way she'd seen the adult Vaskari do during the earlier demonstrations. His fur was incredibly soft, warmer than she'd expected. When the alarm went off, they panicked. When you all burst in with weapons, they got more scared. They came to me because I was calm, because I didn't point anything at them or shout. A smaller cub whimpered, burying her face against Kaelin's shoulder. The human woman wrapped an arm around her carefully, supporting her weight. In human culture, Kaylin continued, keeping her voice soft and steady. When children are afraid, adults protect them. We make ourselves calm so they can feel safe. We lower our voices. We show them that everything is okay. She looked up at Commander Thexral. We don't surround them with weapons and shout commands they can't understand yet. The commander's translator crackled. Our intelligence suggested. Your intelligence was wrong, Kaylin interrupted gently. There's no hostage situation. There's no threat. There's just a bunch of scared kids and a lot of confused adults with guns. Silence fell across the chamber. The only sounds were the soft whimpers of the cubs and the hum of charged weapons. Then Vash spoke, his voice small and trembling. Want mother? It was barely more than a whisper, translated through the universal communication implant all coalition members wore. But in the echoing chamber, everyone heard it. Want mother? Another cub repeated. Then another. Soon all 23 cubs were chanting it. A chorus of frightened children calling for parents who weren't there. Kaylin felt her throat tighten. She'd been so focused on staying calm, on not escalating the situation, that she hadn't let herself feel the full weight of what was happening. These babies had been abandoned by circumstances, frightened by the adults meant to protect them, and had turned to the only person in the room who treated them like what they were, children. Ambassador Krelvox's scales had stopped rattling. He stared at the cubs with an expression that Kaylin couldn't quite read. His species' faces were too different from human ones. But something had shifted in his posture. Commander, the ambassador said slowly, lower your weapons. Sir, protocol demands, lower them. Now, gradually, reluctantly, the weapons lowered. The targeting lasers disappeared from the floor. The cub's fur began to shift from distress red back toward calmer blues and greens. Kaylin let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Thank you, she whispered. The chamber doors burst open. The adult Vascari rushed in, their own fur blazing with protective orange. They took in the scene. Their cubs clustered around a kneeling human, coalition soldiers with lowered weapons standing in a circle, and froze. Vash's mother let out a sound that needed no translation. She was across the chamber in 3 bounds, gathering her cub into her arms. The other parents followed, reclaiming their children with visible relief. Vash looked back at Kaylin as his mother held him. Thank you, human Kaylin, he said clearly, his young voice carrying across the chamber. You were not scared. You made us not scared too. Kaylin smiled, feeling tears prick at her eyes. You're welcome, Vash. As the Vascari families reunited and the soldiers began filing out, Ambassador Krelvox approached Kaylin. She stood slowly, her legs stiff from kneeling. That was, the ambassador paused, searching for words. Not how we expected a human to respond in a crisis situation. How did you expect me to respond? With aggression, self-preservation, the protection of your own species above others. He tilted his head. Our intelligence files suggested humans were primarily motivated by tribal loyalty and fear of the unfamiliar. Kaylin looked at the cubs, now safe in their parents' arms, their fur glowing with contentment. Maybe your intelligence files need updating, she said quietly. When we see scared children, we don't see species or tribes or unfamiliar biology. We just see kids who need help. The ambassador's scales rippled in what might have been their equivalent of a nod. Perhaps, he said thoughtfully, that is why the galaxy needs humans after all.